2015. We have a quorum. Mr. Blaine, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Mrs. Blaylock, and a second?
Second.
Ms. Dr. Meyer. All those in favor of the agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 7-0. Okay, going on, we have no public hearing, so on to item 3.01, the Northern Virginia Writing Project. Ms. Flenard.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. The Northern Virginia Writing Project has and continues to open doors for educators in Spotsylvania County. George Mason University and Spotsylvania's Secondary Literacy Liaison, Stephanie Fellinger, worked with a group of 20 teachers from Spotsylvania and surrounding counties in recent summers. The brilliant concept of teachers teaching teachers has ignited a love of writing and learning. The partnership continued this summer, but it is the enthusiasm of the participants going back to their schools to empower others for writing that truly pays forward this learning opportunity. Tonight, Wilderness Elementary School teacher who participated in the Northern Virginia Writing Project last summer will share how the connections did not stop at the end of the summer, but are continuing for coworkers and for our students. This evening, we have the principal of Wilderness Elementary School, Carol Ann Luter, who will introduce her staff and students.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Baker, and members of the board. It's a great evening to be a Wildcat, and if I can just brag a little bit, I just came from a community dinner where my fifth grader ambassadors served over 120 meals to the homeless, and now our fourth graders get to invade you with our writing. So if I could turn it over to their teacher, Mary Beth Thorpe.
Hello, I'm Mary Beth Thorpe. I am the fourth grade teacher at Wilderness. I was the member of the Northern Virginia Writing Project. We are very excited to be here tonight, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to my fourth grade students.
Are you ready to experience writing the Wilderness way? Students at Wilderness write every day about the things that are meaningful and special to us.
Can I do this?
The topics
The
topics come from our hearts, minds, and experiences. At Wilderness, this form of writing is called peace love writing or madman.
Sure, sometimes we get writer's block. When this happens, we write, I wonder. We don't get writer's block too often. These girls will share a quick peek into their peace love writing.
Hi, I'm Brooke, and my story is called Silent. The wind whistled through the dry grass. It made a soft swish against the quiet paw steps of a warrior so great she was praised. Maple crept through the silent darkness. The only sound was a distant caw of a hawk. Her auburn tail was aloft in the breezy, bone-chilling wind. It was so incredibly quiet, too quiet. And then a loud battle cry made Maple dart for her safe and cozy den. But then a blinding pain in her side made her stop. She laid down and closed her eyes.
Hi, I am Natalie. The story is called The Lost Dog. One day I found a dog. The dog looked like mine, so I brought it home. I showed my mom. My mom said, that looks like Lou. I said, oh my, I thought that too. I put her in the crate. She started crying, so I got the dog so it could sleep with me in my room. Then it fell asleep. In the morning, guess what happened?
Hi, my name is Rory.
The title of my story is Haunted Challenges. Lily and Hollis are the smartest kids in school and are always the teacher's pet. We wish, exclaimed Hollis and Lily, giggling uncontrollably. Lily and Hollis are sisters with 4 other siblings, Lowell, Mia, Kendra, and Sawyer. Lowell is 13, Mia is 11, Kendra is 12, and Sawyer, Lily, and Hollis are 16. Hey, keep it down in there, shouted Lowell from his room down the hall. Why should we? Hollis and Lily shouted back. You little... Never mind. The door opened all of a sudden, and Kendra came in to give them their mail. Here you go, she said as she handed Lily their mail. We got mail, they shouted together, surprised. The letter said,
Hi, my name is Madison. My story is called My Dream. My favorite animal is a dolphin. I love dolphins because they are so cute and very gentle. I love everything about them, even the way they dazzle in the moonlight. They are awesome at doing flips and other things like that. If I had enough money and an enormous mansion, I would definitely buy one to play with all day long.
Thanks, guys. Sharing what we write is a big part of Peace Love Writing. Sharing is listening to buddies and connecting. Boy, have we learned a lot from and about each other. That's the best part of Peace Love Writing.
So now it's your turn to experience writing with us the Wilderness Way. Please get your notebook and pencil.
Speak up right in there. Give them a second to get their seat. Good job.
You will now participate in Piece of Writing.
Go right up to it.
Remember, Piece of Writing is from your heart, mind, and experiences. For tonight, I will give you 1 minute to write. No worries, 1 minute is plenty of time. Let's start. Begin writing now.
So you are writing about what's in your mind, your heart, and your experiences for 1 minute.
Oh, gee,
Say your mind. Look right up to the middle.
Please finish the last thought you are writing.
Okay, let's go to the side. Okay, I'll tell you when. You gotta go right up to the side.
Could you please put your pencils down and look at us? Thank you.
Now it's time to share your writing. You have a 4th grade buddy standing beside you. Take turns reading and connecting.
You don't care what Mrs. Foster is? She's this wonder. That's Mrs. Karen Foster and her courage for love, and love for humanity.
Ooh, there was a clash at the door. It was my dog. I can't believe it's Molly.
There you go. What's your name? And what grade that is? 5th grade? 4th grade. Oh, wonderful.
Give me 5.
Thank you.
What you experienced tonight was a very quick glimpse of peace love writing. You did an awesome job. We would like you to continue to write each day, even if it is only for a couple of minutes.
Writing is powerful. It makes us feel good and feel real. We love Peace Love Writing because it gives a chance to write about things that we find interesting. We love writing so much, we find ourselves writing in all subjects. When you love doing something so much, you don't even feel like you are doing work. We hope you enjoyed Peace Love Writing and grow to love it as much as we do. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Bella said it perfectly. Writing is powerful. Writing is real. Writing requires us to think. So at Wilderness, we are thinking and writing, sharing, and connecting. And we'd like to invite you to come out to Wilderness and write the Wilderness Way anytime you would like. And also, just one quick note, I just wanted to really thank you for finding the money in the budget for the Northern Virginia Writing Project. It changed my life as a writer and as a teacher of writing, and I really appreciate that. And you have opened the doors for so many educators again this summer. So thank you so very much. Okay, guys, come back down.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Way to go, Wildcats. And thank you very much for our journals, so we can write every day, and we'll think of Wilderness when we do it. So thanks so much. Okay, on to item 4.01, Hometown Heroes Contest winners. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. This year, the Freelance Stars Newspaper and Education Writing Contest featured Hometown Heroes. Students in grades 4 through 6 were eligible to interview someone who plays an important role in the community and write a story of inspiration about that person. Spotsylvania County Public Schools has several students selected as winners of this contest. Tonight, we are excited to recognize these talented students, and we ask them to please come forward to read their winning entries. So as I call all of the winners, if you could please come up, and then once we have everybody up here, if you could please read your story. In 4th grade, first place, Chelsea Hacking from Chancellor Elementary School. Fifth grade winners from first place, we have Sarah Whitehurst from Harrison Road Elementary. Second place winner, we have Isabel Peters from Chancellor Elementary. And although he's unable to join us, we have Owen Latch from Chancellor Elementary who took 3rd place. Our 6th grade winner, first place, Baylor Gallagher from Chancellor Middle School. And the contest grand prize winner was Post Oak Middle School's 6th grader, Taylor Gray. As the grand prize winner, Taylor has won $200, and her story will be published on kidscoop.org. So at this time, if we could take the opportunity to hear these wonderful stories after a great picture. So why don't we begin with Chelsea?
Quick is an inspiration to me because she is the happiest and most selfless person I know. Amanda is an interior designer for a retirement home, but she does more than just make it beautiful. She spends lots of time with each new tenant as they adjust to their new life because moving into a retirement home can be hard. Sometimes Amanda's job can be hard because she tries to make people happy, but it doesn't always work. I'm sure that on those days, Amanda wishes she took a different job that was easier and fancier, but she said she feels happy when she can bring people comfort. As a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Amanda Cook helps serve her congregation. She is part of the lay ministry and is in charge of the spiritual education of 65 kids. This is not an easy or popular job. She has to make sure that there are teachers for all the classes and teach group lessons for all the kids. Amanda makes everyone feel loved. They learn the teachings of Jesus from her example. I know because I am one of those kids. Another reason Amanda is my hero because she does this job even when she and her husband can't have kids of their own. Over a year ago, Amanda found out that her husband's sister, Mandy, has a rare kind of cancer. Amanda and her husband help a lot, cooking, cleaning, and helping their nieces and nephews with their homework and activities, and driving Mandy to her doctor appointments. I asked Amanda how she stays happy even though Mandy is so sick. She said, I stay focused on positive things. We spend time having fun with her and her family. Fun is the best way to stay happy around sick people because fun is always fun, even when you are sick. I wondered what helps Amanda be happy, and she said, I remember that life is not one event, but it is small pieces of time. Sometimes those pieces are sad, but there are often pieces that are happy. The best way to forget about your own troubles is to help other people. Amanda said that she stops feeling sad when she puts other people's needs in front of hers. I've seen Amanda do this. I want to be like her when I grow up.
Thank you, Chelsea. Sarah?
Kathy Hoffman, a hero who serves. Kathy Hoffman is an amazing nurse who has given her time and effort to the U.S. Army and Fredericksburg community. She grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. She wanted to be a nurse since she was 2 years old. I just wanted to help people, she said. Kathy served as a nurse in the Army from 1985 to 1996. Like naturally wanting to be a nurse, she also wanted to be in the Army. It's something that pushes you to be the best that you can be, she said. She was sworn into the Army by her husband at the age of 32 and had 2 children. She served in Army hospitals including Fort Belvoir, Scott Air Force Base, and Letterman Army Hospital in California. She enjoyed doing her C4 classes, which trained her to be a nurse on the battlefield. It was a really great experience. Not everybody gets to do that, she said. During Operation Desert Storm, Kathy had a difficult time when she was split from her unit and separated from her children. As a mother, you think, am I ever going to see my children again? Because you don't know what is going to happen. It's not fear for your life, she said. Today she serves in the Fredericksburg community by volunteering for several organizations. There are so many different ways to serve, she said. Kathy has been involved with Wounded Warrior Project and is active with the Chamber of Commerce. She partners with the Widener School of Nursing, which sends students to Walter Reed Medical Center to care for wounded soldiers. She has volunteered with the Moss Free Clinic for 10 years. Kathy enjoys what she does as a volunteer. It's a part of my DNA. It's what makes me me, she said.
Thank you. Isabel?
They, my dad is loving, caring, and to me, he is a hero. 8 years ago, my father was part of the Special Weapons and Tactics Team, SWAT. While he was part of the team, he saved many lives and he was good at it. Later, he had to leave the SWAT team to be able to see my brother, sister, and me. Those 2 reasons are why he is my hero. My dad had great skills when it came to SWAT. He had many successful missions. There was one mission when he ended up unintentionally pointing his rifle at a child. because a violent felon pushed the child into the fire zone. Soon, my father noticed he wasn't seeing his kids very often. What was he going to do? In order to see my siblings and me, he had to quit. As soon as he left it, he missed it terribly. He knew he had a talent with guns and tactics and wanted to go back. My dad wishes he could be on the SWAT team and still see his children often. However, that is not usually the reality of a SWAT team member. He made the sacrifice to give up a career that he loves so that he can be with us more. Now my dad does computer work and doesn't have to travel for work like he used to do. My dad takes me special places like Great Wolf Lodge. We also go to the park and on special motorcycle rides, just the two of us. I love that my dad is always there for me. Whenever I'm sick, I just call him to talk to him, and he immediately wants to come to my side and take care of me. My dad means a lot to me, and ever since he and my mom got divorced, he and I have gotten much closer. My dad is a hero. He saved lives when he was part of SWAT, and although he loves SWAT, he gave up his jobs to be with his kids more. I love him, and he works hard to provide my siblings and me. He is there for me when I need him, and that is why my dad is my hometown hero.
You can use your card.
Baylor?
Ann Cockner has never saved a child from a burning building, but she saves many children from domestic violence. Clockner is an attorney for Rappahannock Legal Services, which provides free legal aid to people who have civil cases against them and for people who can't afford a lawyer. She works a nonprofit job and loves it. I can't believe I get paid to do this, she said during a recent interview at her office on Lafayette Boulevard. I noticed her business card on her desk while I was interviewing her. On it read, "Because justice really should be for all." Toward the end of the interview, she asked me a question. What are the last 3 words in the Pledge of Allegiance? After reciting the words in my mind, I answered, "Justice for all." "Justice for rich people?" she asked. "No, justice for all," I answered. "Ah," she said, "all, the most important word in the whole pledge." I asked her what the most rewarding part of her job was and what the most frustrating part was. She told me she couldn't stand it when she had to turn people down. "It is crummy," she said. She told me the most rewarding part is when she feels needed and when she feels as if she has made a change in somebody's life. She told me that Rappahannock Legal Services serves 17 counties and only has 5 lawyers. They have offices in Culpeper, Tappahannock, and right here in Fredericksburg. She also informed me that there are 3 courts in each county they serve. I asked how many court cases they have a year. She told me that last year they had about 1,300 cases, and the office in Fredericksburg handled about 800 of those cases. If it weren't for people like Clockner, many people wouldn't be able to afford a lawyer, and then the problem would most likely keep happening. Clockner's not in it for the money. She is in it for the people. She is in it to change people's lives. She is in it to ensure justice for all.
And Taylor.
Mrs. Karen Foster, a hometown hero. A hero is defined as a person who is admired for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. Beside that definition, there should be a picture of Mrs. Karen Foster. Mrs. Foster is a hometown hero because she is the proud principal of Post Oak Middle School while still battling breast cancer with courage, and she is a giving and inspirational member of our community. These are just a few of the things you can see sewn into Mrs. Foster's hero cape. Mrs. Foster is a hero for children and education. If you ask her, she says she has 800 kids. This is because she is the principal of Post Oak Middle School. She chose to be a principal because she wanted to maximize her impact on student success. She thinks that education provides a pathway for students to prepare for the future they want to pursue, and she hopes that the work she does impacts lives in a positive manner. Mrs. Foster works with teachers to improve our learning. She also works with students on any issues they may have in or out of school. She says that her favorite part of being a principal is seeing students learn and grow and do things they might not think they could do. Mrs. Foster is a hero because despite recently being diagnosed with breast cancer, she continues to be a strong leader and mentor. She has continued to work tirelessly for us while having surgery, then undergoing chemotherapy and radiation. She says her journey has made her more aware of being sure to live in the moment and be thankful. She says she hopes that her experience helps students to see that even when difficult things happen to you, staying positive and working through them makes you stronger. Her determination and courage is an inspiration to all of us. Mrs. Foster is a hero because she thinks of others before herself. She is an active member of the community. She supports the local food bank, Boy Scouts of America, and her church. She says community involvement is important because investing in others makes the world a better place. When teachers organized a t-shirt benefit for her, instead of keeping the money for herself, she requested that it be donated to a local cancer center. In just 2 weeks, $2,550 was raised. Mrs. Foster is a true hero.
If any of those hometown heroes that were mentioned through the essays tonight, if those individuals could please stand as we recognize you one more time. Congratulations to all these phenomenal writers. Please keep up the great work.
We have some amazing writers in Spotsylvania County. We really do. And they wrote about some very amazing people. So thank you for that and for showcasing the amazing people. Mr. Wolf, on to item 4.02, Future Business Leaders of America, State Conference.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over spring break, 23 Riverbend High School Future Business Leaders of America members traveled to FBLA State Leadership Conference in Western Virginia to compete in various business and technology events. The following students placed in the top 5 in their respective events. Students who place first, second, and third are eligible to participate in the national competition in June in Chicago, Illinois. So if the following people could please come forward. Terry Pickering, first place, Database Design and Application. In third place for sales presentation, we have Christina Stinson. For third place in desktop publishing, we have Caitlin Pruden and Chrissy Johnson. And in fifth place business presentation, we have Matt Walker and Jeffrey Sen. In addition, Chrissy Johnson and Andrew Wilgang were selected to participate in and completed the Foundation Leadership Institute. Only 2 students from each region, for a total of 22 students, are selected from Virginia to participate. The Institute is a 2-day workshop that provides students with valuable leadership skills, including public speaking, organization, time management, and team building. Also at this time, we would like to recognize Sean Howard, who was recently appointed as the Virginia FBLA Secretary-Treasurer for 2015-16. Sean Howard. Thank you, everybody. In addition, if we could please recognize if you are a parent of any of these individuals who were just recognized, or their teacher, if you could stand and be recognized.
If we could continue on with 4.03, unless, Mr. Wolf, you want to continue, then we can go on with 4.03. Ms. Daniels, if you could do the Spotsylvania Education Foundation 2014-2015 grant recipients.
I'm going to introduce the president of the foundation, Carl Engelbretson, and he's going to speak about this. I'll turn it over to Carl.
Thank you, Renee. Madam Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Baker, on behalf of the Spotsylvania Education Foundation, I am honored to present faculty and staff who have received professional development and leadership grants from the foundation this year. Since next week is Teacher Appreciation Week, I take great satisfaction in laying the groundwork for that by announcing grants and recipients today and honoring excellence in education with the Sage Teacher of the Year banquet on Friday. What a great lead-in for Teacher Appreciation Week. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I do want to mention two other important upcoming foundation events that will produce resources for next year's programs like Idea Grants. On Tuesday, May 5th, which so happens to be Teacher Appreciation Day, the Community Give 24 Hours of Giving takes place. From midnight to midnight on May 5th, charitable donations are being taken by the Community Foundation. The Spotsylvania Education Foundation has pledged 100% of all donations received during the Community Give will go to programs supporting teachers and students next year. It would be great to honor and make a donation on behalf of a teacher or in recognition of a favorite teacher. The second event is the Foundation's annual golf tournament, which will be held Monday, June 29th at Fawn Lake Country Club. Come play a little golf, get a little exercise, share a laugh, and support education. 36 years ago, I had the honor of speaking at the Spotsylvania High School graduation ceremony. The theme of my speech was that high school diploma was the key to opening doors of opportunity. Now that I'm older, my focus has changed just a little bit. I believe in continuing education and professional development as the keys that open doors of opportunity. To that end, the Spotsylvania Education Foundation is proud to provide grants to Spotsylvania teachers and staff to support their leadership and professional development. This year, we awarded our first Dr. Jerry Hill Leadership Grant and 19 Spotsylvania Endowment for Education Development, or SEED grants. As I call your name, please come forward to be recognized. The Dr. Jerry Hill Leadership Grant in the amount of $1,000 is designated for a classroom teacher who desires to expand classroom leadership skills and work with his or her school faculty in a collaborative effort to promote professional growth and improve educational resources. The inaugural recipient of the Dr. Jerry Hill Leadership Grant is Kristen Weidel, teaching and learning coach supporting Battlefield Middle School and Thornburg Middle School. Kristen is working on her doctorate in educational leadership. She works as a student-centered partner for teachers responsible for modeling and guiding instructional best practices and embedded professional learning. She looks for ways to make connections with teachers and to advocate for new teaching styles and bring ingenuity into schools. Kristen's goal is to help teachers improve student learning by identifying classroom instruction strategies, reflecting on the impact of strategies, and modifying and adapting until finding the best strategy to maximize the potential of each learner. Kristen consistently seeks ways to connect with teachers and administrators in order to support student learning. She's intuitive in recognizing needs and adept at recognizing solutions to those needs. A core value of Spotsylvania County Public Schools is to develop visionary leaders who embrace change and possibilities. Kristen is one of those leaders. She affects positive change in the classroom and schools where she works. Teachers and school employees participate in professional development to maintain and improve professional competence. keep abreast of new technology and innovative practices, and comply with professional requirements. Each year, the foundation helps supports this initiative by providing seed grants to Spotsylvania County Public Schools staff. These professional development grants are funded by teachers and employees through Jeans Day fundraisers, which allow teachers to wear jeans on specific days. This year, $6,609 was raised by wearing jeans, and $6,609 were given out in grants. I want to congratulate Cortland Elementary, Principal Sherry Steele, and school ambassadors Val Williams and Kristen Serena Lee for raising the most funds for this grant program. The faculty and staff of Cortland Elementary raised $420. In honor of Cortland Elementary's fantastic support of the SEED program, I have a gift card for a 12-foot submarine sandwich for the faculty and staff. Is anybody here from Cortland Elementary? The fall 2014 recipients of $3,000 of seed grants were awarded to the following individuals. Susan Benhesse, paraeducator at Smith Steltion Elementary School. Kristen Parsley, fourth grade teacher at Harrison Road Elementary School. Gretchen Tiblin, third grade teacher at Harrison Road Elementary School. Gina Conley, scope teacher at Harrison Road Elementary School. Lori Buckingham, behavior specialist at the Office of Student Support Services. Jessica Carter, special education teacher at Freedom Middle School. John Rena Zabonel, orchestra teacher at Riverbend High School, Nye River Middle School. Rabba Sabatini, tech ed teacher at Massaponax High School. Jeremy Wedd, tech ed teacher at Spotsylvania High School. Karen Washington, English teacher at John J. Wright Education Cultural Center. And Jenny Storm, lead bus driver at Transportation Department. Are there any of those folks? Spring 2015 recipients of $3,609 of seed grants are the following. Kristen Freza, school nurse, Courthouse Road Elementary School. Elizabeth Racer, Title I reading teacher, Riverview Elementary School. Danielle Relia, early childhood special education teacher. Andrea Meninin, reading specialist at Post Oak Middle School. Penny Anderson, social studies teacher, Riverbend High School. Dennis Beck, first grade teacher, Harrison Road Elementary School. Susan Dodden Diadio, nursing instructor, Spotsylvania Career and Technical Center. And Michelle Engel, speech language pathologist, Freedom Middle School. Congratulations to all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Wolf, we'd like to have you go back to 4.02. I believe we have a recipient in the audience, and we don't want to overlook them.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you. As my wife tells me, I should get bifocals. I just don't believe that I should. But I certainly owe an apology to Katarina Van Bruggen and Robert Amos if they are here. They received 5th place in business ethics from the FBLA competition. And if I could please get the members who were already up here, if you could come up here to get another group photo. So I certainly do apologize.
Continue on with the awards, 4.04, Spotsylvania Career and Technical Center, Skills USA, please.
Sure, and prior to us moving on, if Katarina's mom is here, I believe, if she could stand up, and please don't, look, I'm standing right here. If anything, all of you have just proven my wife right, so, again. Okay, thank you. Skills USA is a CTSO for students in a trade and industrial program area. These programs are housed at the Spotsylvania Career and Technical Center. Please join me in congratulating the following gold member winners. We have Konstantin Froloff in computer programming, although he is not here, I believe. Okay. But we have Adam McGough from Technical Computer Applications. His instructor is Mr. Stephen Tate, who I believe is in the audience as well. And then we have for collision repair technology, Luke Rowe with his instructor, Mr. Mark Goodman. These students and teachers will be traveling to Louisville, Kentucky in June 2015 to compete in the National Skills USA competition. And if their parents are here or anybody else to support them, we would appreciate if you would stand so we could recognize your support as well. Thank you.
Continue with 4.05, Spotsylvania Career and Technical Center, FCCLA.
Thank you. FCCLA is the student organization associated with the Family and Consumer Science program area. The division has course offerings in this program area at the Career and Technical Center and at our comprehensive high schools. The winners are from Spotsylvania Career and Tech Center. Please join me in congratulating the following national qualifiers. Christiana Ball for Chapter Service Project Display, Wait to Text. For Sports Nutrition Display and Presentation, we have Nicole McCallick and Michaela Campbell. And then in Chapter and Review, we have Claire Gerald and Miriam Ebdajalaliel. Miriam is not here, and she's probably very happy that she's not. I'm very thankful as well as I said that last name. So the instructor is Miss Terry Evers, if she is here. These students and teachers will be traveling to Washington, D.C. in July 2015 for the national competition. If their parents or any other supporters are here tonight, so if you could stand to be recognized.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
And Mr. Wolf, last but not least, 4.06, Riverbend High School, FCCLA.
Thank you, sir. Riverbend High School is proud to congratulate Alexis Coles for winning a silver medal and Cassidy Dotson, Raven Judkins, and Emily White for winning gold medal at the FCCLA State Leadership Conference. These girls worked many hours to bring back these medals to Riverbend High School. And if their parents are here, if you could stand to be recognized, or their teacher, that'd be great.
Okay, moving on to item 5.01, public comments. Dr. Martin, could you please give the directions?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The public comment segment of our board meetings is a time to receive recommendations, suggestions, concerns, and comments from the general public. Each speaker is allotted 5 minutes, and we ask that they clearly state the name, address, and/or voting district for the board. A speaker may request additional time from the board should one's 5-minute allotment expire. We ask that you keep your comments focused on the issues and that all speakers maintain a level of decorum and mutual respect for one another. Our first speaker is Peter Fodenauer.
Good evening, Chairwoman Shelley, Dr. Baker, other members of the school board, and administrators. My name is Peter Fotenhauer. I am a civics teacher at Nye River Middle School, and I am the president of the Spotsylvania Education Association. The podium felt a little further up, and I'm not sure if that's whether the chairs are further back or it's beginning to feel like church. Everybody's sitting back there in the back now. I wanted to speak tonight about several issues. First, I wanted to thank Mr. Blaine and Ms. Shelley for their attendance at the VEA and PTA Put Kids First rally on the 18th of April. Ms. Shelley gave a terrific speech. She was one of several very energetic, enthusiastic speakers who talked about the need to increase state support for public schools so that we can have smaller classes, so that teachers can be more effective, and that we need to reduce the amount of over-testing that is being forced upon our students, that is getting ready to start as we get close to the beginning of the end of another school year. There was an energy there that I think is badly needed in a lot of places in public education. Being fairly active on the state level with several of the groups that were represented, there were a number of people there that I knew, and it's always great to be surrounded with people that you know you can count on, that are good enough friends where when the chips are down, you can have a very open conversation with them without having to worry about how they are going to react to constructive criticism or a difference of opinions. And I would suggest to the 7 of you that if you have that kind of relationship with your fellow members on the Board of Supervisors, that after their decision to provide only $17,000 in new funding for the school division for the upcoming year, it's time to pick up the phone and have that conversation. I'm a bit disappointed there hasn't been more community reaction to the lack of a fully funded school board budget. When 5 out of every 7 citizens who speak at a public hearing support fully funding our schools, and the Board of Supervisors chooses not to do so, clearly we have work to do, a relationship to build, and further to go than we thought. We need to reach out to each and every one of those 50 speakers from the public who urge the supervisors to show their support for public education and continue to engage them in the process of properly supporting our public schools. Doing so is not a one-time-a-year effort, just as the rally that was held on April 18th is not going to be a one-time event. It was the beginning of something much larger, because as we know, there are many competing needs in our society today. All of us have invested our time and energies in public education is one that we value. And for every one of us, there are other individuals in our community who believe equally as strongly that in another issue or cause that deserves support. So we need to work together to keep school funding on the front burner. It is SOL testing season. It's not quite bad enough where you need to dress your children in orange, but our nation has a testing addiction. We are over-testing our children and doing so in ways that, as parents across the United States, beginning to opt their children out of testing. So much so that the Secretary of Education recently commented that if parents were going to opt their students out, the federal government would have to find ways to opt them back in. Secretary Duncan has worked hard to promote the idea that we must test and punish schools that cannot make arbitrary numbers. In Virginia, we've gone a different route, and SEA and many students in schools will be very grateful to Principal Deborah Frazier for her leadership on the SOL Innovation Committee that championed expedited retakes for middle and elementary school students, because in many cases, an entire school is accredited with warning or categorized in some way because of one or two students in one or two of our groups that are checked for annual measurable objectives because they score a 399 and fail a test by one question. They deserve a chance to take that test again, and they will get it this year. It's up to us to figure out the logistics of how to do so when no additional resources have been allocated to allow for including those tests in what is already an overwhelming testing calendar. And I encourage us to be careful as we do so, to do so in a way that respects the student's dignity and does not put further undue stress on our 8 to 12 and 14-year-olds who are already stressed out about their testing. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that's all of our speakers.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Is there anyone else in the audience that would care to speak? Come on up, please. State your name and your voting district.
Thank you all. I hadn't prepared anything to speak about tonight. I hadn't intended to speak, so I apologize if it's very short or very long. But my name is Joe Kingman. I live in the Cortland district. My daughter goes to Salem Elementary. I'm running for Board of Supervisors this year, and I wanted to be able to have the opportunity to address you all and thank you for the hard work that you're doing. Part of what made me want to run was the recent funding decision regarding the schools from the Board of Supervisors. I don't know the inner workings of how the school board operates. That's why I'm here tonight, is to learn a little bit more about some of the ways that you all do business and the way that you run our schools. But what I do know is about how to drive an economy, about how to generate business, and about how to build a future for Spotsylvania. And a big part of that is education. For me, funding our schools isn't as big a priority as transportation and infrastructure when it comes to being able to growing an economy. If we don't have a workforce that's ready to take on high-tech jobs and high-paying jobs, there will be very little opportunity for us to be able to recruit those businesses to come to Spotsylvania County. So it's really an economic question for the future of everyone in the county. If we can start to recruit businesses that pay higher salaries, that drive incomes higher in Spotsylvania County and raise the median income, then it's better for everyone. I'd like to be able to ask everyone in the room for their support in doing that. I live in the Cortland district, so Dr. Meyer, hopefully you and I can catch up at some point. But really, that's all I wanted to say, is that I appreciate everything that you all have done. I was very, very disappointed in the funding from the Board of Supervisors this year. And my pledge is to be able to work together with you all and find adequate funding for our schools and be able to improve the system from that way. So thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would care to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to close 5.02, move on to Dr. Baker. Do you have anything? Oops, I'm sorry. It's one of those days. 5.02, that's us now. Board member comments. I'm going to start on Ms. Gramp's side. Thank you.
I would just like to congratulate everybody who got recognized and got their awards tonight. It is a very long list, but it makes us very proud that we have that many successful students. With that, that's all I'm going to say, because we have a very busy budget work session following this, and we have to get to work.
It was exciting to be in Richmond on the 18th, I guess it was, with the VEA. Really exciting, I could tell you, to hear the cheers and the enthusiasm and the excitement about the concept of put children first. And I endorse that very much, and I want to thank VEA and the PTA for organizing that, and hope that you'll be able to do that on an annual basis. I think it'll be very helpful. Last Saturday, there was a summit meeting at University of Mary Washington about the STEM program. I think it's the 5th annual one, and it was quite exciting to see the accomplishments of our students. I talked with Ms. Parsley from Harrison Road Elementary School, and she was telling me about some of the things she's been doing, and I was very impressed with that activity. I talked to 4 students from Riverbend High School who were involved, and I'd like to compliment all of the schools that are working with our students in the whole STEM program: science, technology, engineering, and math. And I want once more to mention the program that was operated by Riverview Elementary, Thornburg, and Massaponax, where they got those 3 levels of students, teachers and students together, and ran for throughout the year. Really exciting program, and they are been selected to demonstrate some of their things at the Governor's Education Conference in the middle of the summer. Finally, on Saturday coming, going to be an exciting activity at Post Oak Middle School called The Great Debate, and I'm looking forward to that. And Mo, Petway, I'm glad to have you have organized that.
I intend to hold any comments that I have until we have the work session. I know we have a lot to discuss, and most of my comments center around the budget, so I'll wait until then, and that way I can engage with my peers. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one word of thanks to Tedra Richardson for this past Monday in her presentation at the VSBA regional meeting. New insights into the collaboration between our special ed and general ed teachers, and looking for new ways. And Riverbend has been working on a pilot project this year. So congratulations to all you, and as well as what Ms. Gramp said, to our students and faculty for this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, quite frankly, wasn't planning on saying anything tonight until this morning that I walked out to pick up my copy of the morning newspaper, and I was overwhelmed to see in the front page a picture of one of my favorite human beings, the principal of Post Oak Middle School, Karen Foster. I have known Mrs. Foster since she was Mr. Wolf's assistant principal at Post Oak, and when he left, he took off his Pittsburgh Steelers stuff, which enhanced the beauty of the school. And it gave him an opportunity to damage this building, but also, bring his leadership, which is welcome here. But Mrs. Foster has followed his playbook at Post Oak. she's a wonderful person that I will share this personal story with all of you. About 5 years ago, I was at a town hall meeting, and at the end of the meeting, people that had not spoken during the meeting were asked to introduce themselves. And she said, my name is Karen Foster, and I have 2 biological children and 900 other children that attend my school. And it blew my mind because she meant it. To me, she has always meant faith, dedication, compassion, and I know her husband is a Marine, but I think she has more courage than any Marine in the Corps. So, Mrs. Foster, if you're listening, I love you. I thank you, and thank you for your dedication to this community, to the children, your children at Post Oak, and thank you for enhancing my life forever. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Laura. And I wanted to, Dr. Meyer said thank you to Ms. Richardson for the presentation. I also want to thank Mrs. Daniels for organizing the VSBA dinner for our region. So thank you very much for that as well. And then, as Mr. Engelbretson mentioned, next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week. So I just wanted to remind everyone that we have some wonderful people in all of our buildings, and if you get the chance to just make sure you say thank you to them, because they've been working really hard and they will continue to work really hard. So with that, I'm going to close board member comments. And now, Dr. Baker, move on to 5.03, Superintendent Report.
Thank you. Ms. Shelley, knowing again that we have a work session to follow, and I'll be bringing some opening comments to sort of set the stage for that, the work that's going to be done there, I'll be very brief. Again, tonight was just what we've witnessed so far, very inspirational from our students and the Hometown Heroes essays and all of the different recognitions. We have so much to be proud of, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to reinforce that. I also, just as we, sort of as a segue for later on when we go into budget considerations, knowing that we need to find a way to balance the budget and to close the current funding gap, one of the things that I thought that the Northern Virginia Writing Project, oftentimes you hear as a board about high quality and impactful professional development, but to be able to see how it has paid into the classroom, how it has impacted what students are receiving, and how they brought the teachers' learning to you, because the teachers' learning became their experiences tonight. Again, I think underscores the importance when we say that all the things that we put in the budget are critical and important. Sometimes that we get glazed looks on that. But high quality professional development is something that we need to continue to find a way to fund each year, because we see the impact that it has when a teacher and the opportunity match and they bring it alive in the classroom. So I did want to reinforce that, as I know we'll be talking quite a bit about potential budget reductions going into next year. So at this point, I will conclude any other thoughts until later. Thank you.
Thank you. Any board committee reports? Okay, we did have a food task force meeting this past week, just to discuss what's happening in the food with our company, and how we're actually doing very well. There will be a little bit going into our fund balance with that. And then on to the consent agenda items. Dr. Martin.
On the consent agenda this evening are the minutes of the March 24th, 2015 joint work session with the Board of Supervisors, the April 1st, 2015 special meeting regarding the Advanced Ed Exit Report, and the April 13th, 2015 regular meeting. And finally, donations, which are usual and customary. Staff asked that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
May I have a motion to approve the consent
I
agenda?
will so move, Madam Chairman.
Mr. Blaine, in a second.
Second.
by Mr. Braswell. All those in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, 6-0 with Ms. Blaylock absent. On to the action items. Item 8.01, approval of the local plan for career and technical education. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, good evening, members of the board, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. At the last school board meeting on April 13th, 2015, a presentation of the local plan for career and technical education was given. This plan is required by the Virginia Department of Education to be developed and updated annually. It is the recommendation of administration that the school board approves the local plan for career and technical education as presented.
Okay. You wanted to?
Yes.
Mr. Blaine?
I would like to move the recommended action.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Meyer. Okay. All those in favor of wait, do we have a comments? I'm sorry. Do you have a comment? Okay. All right. All those in favor of the local plan for career and technical education, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Approval of the special education plan, Ms. Richardson.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. Every year, the Office of Student Support Services writes an annual plan to apply for federal funds to support special education programs across the school division. The plan is reviewed by our local special education advisory board, and once it is approved, it is submitted to the Virginia Department of Education. A copy of the plan was provided to each member of the board, and the contents of the plan were featured in a special report to the board on April 13th. At this time, it is the recommendation that the board approves the annual plan application for special education for 2016.
Motion by Ms. Grant, second by Mrs. Blaylock. Any discussion? All those in favor of the special education annual plan, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to item 8.03, approval of Head Start. Ms. Flenard.
Good evening again. Staff is requesting the board's approval of the Head Start continuation application for the second budget period of the 5-year project period, August 1st, 2015 through July 31st, 2016. The application is due April 30th of this year, just a few short days away. The required documents for submission to the Administration for Children and Families are listed below, as well as attached to your board doc, and is administration's recommendation that the board approve the Head Start continuation grant application as presented.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Braswell, a second by Mrs. Grant. Any discussion? All those in favor of the Head Start continuation grant, aye. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? 7-0. Thank you. Okay, informational items, all usual and customary? Okay, thank you. On to item 10.01, and unfinished business. Anything there? No? Okay, item 10.02, anyone have any new business? Okay, moving on to closed meeting. Item 11.01. Be it resolved that the board conducts a closed meeting for the following purpose: consideration of candidates for employment, assignment, promotion, demotion, and discipline of employees, or resignation of employees who have a contractual commitment to the board as permitted by 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia. May I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved, Madam Chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion by Dr. Meyer, a second by Mr. Blaine. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? Okay, 7-0. We are in closed session. Certification. Whereas the Spotsylvania County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.23711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the school board that such a closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting. May I have a motion, please?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion by Dr. Meyer. A second? Ms. Grant? And a roll call vote, please, starting with Ms. Grant.
Gramp, aye.
Blaine, aye.
Braswell, aye.
Shelley, aye.
Blaylock, aye.
Meyer, aye.
7-0. Dr. Martin, would you please read the items from the meeting?
Motion is that the school board accepts the recommendations of the superintendent for personnel appointments, assignments, transfers, resignations, retirements, and termination as presented in closed meeting and permitted by Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia.
May I have a motion to accept the, yes, Ms. Grant? Thank you. And a second?
Second.
I'm going to give that to Ms. Blaylock. All those in favor of items from the closed meeting? Aye. Opposed? 7-0. Motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Dr. Meyer, and a second by Mr. Laura. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? 7-0.
what we're saying. Kara looked at me like I was dead serious for a minute. Really? Yes. Why don't you come up there? Because we're down here. Oh, I'm so glad the camera's on the back of y'all's heads. Yeah. I said here so y'all could see me really well. I asked for the end. Wanted you to see me. Yeah, I'm always right to say that. Probably.
Okay, I'd like to call to order our work session for April 27th, 2015. We have a quorum. We are all here. A motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Braswell? And a second?
Second.
Dr. Meyer, all those in favor of approving the agenda as is? Aye. Any opposed? 7-0. Okay, Dr. Baker, opening comments.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, thank you for your time and attention tonight. I want to thank you in advance for the work that you're going to be engaged in over the next half hour to an hour, I would say. Also, thank you for your focus, your support throughout this budget season. I think that the recap that will be provided by staff underscores again that from day one, you as an individual and collective board have been 100% behind the efforts of staff in putting together a budget that addresses a variety of needs that is multifaceted. And I am very proud of the budget and where we are at this point. We look forward to working with you on being able to close the budget gap. One reminder as we go forth, rather than staff coming out tonight with a definitive recommendation, what we have done is put together one starter scenario that LaShawn Gaines will share with you a little bit later that really is a jumping off point for addressing the current budget gap that we have and that needs to be balanced before the board approves the final budget. Two big pieces of that starter scenario has been a focus throughout this budget season, which is to maintain within the integrity of the budget two very important pieces of that. One is all current and new positions that were a part of this budget presentation, to be able to maintain those, as well as being able to preserve and maintain all of the compensation increase components in this budget. So that's where we begin with the starter scenario in primarily looking at non-compensation. So I give you a sneak preview into that, but as we go through, we look forward to giving you a recap and then to your thoughts and ideas and suggestions as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. And I'm just going to briefly say we're here to talk about what the staff has brought to us, what our thoughts are. We will come to a consensus tonight. There is no vote tonight, but we need to kind of have an idea of where we are going to ask staff to go to bring it to us at the next meeting so that we can vote. Thank you. And now, Mrs. Gaines, the revenue update.
Good evening, school board members, Dr. Baker, Dr. Meyer, and staff. In looking at your packet, what I want to first make sure is that you have a blue folder in front of you. And if you look at your folder, to the left of your folder, you should have a PowerPoint. That is the same PowerPoint that we will display on the screen this evening. To the right-hand side, you should see a packet of information. So as we go through the presentation, we will reference both the PowerPoint and we will reference the handout. So when we look at the revenue update, We're going to talk about the revenue update on today. We're going to also share with you an update in terms of where we stand with our ERIP program. We're going to share with you the 3-year budget forecast for 17, 18, and 19. And then we'll begin the gap closing discussion. Depending upon how much progress we're able to make this evening, we will be asking the school board for direction in terms of the May 4th work session. By way of next steps, we do know the next step primarily is for the school board to adopt this budget on May the 11th. So revenue update. If you look here, what you basically see, we have 4 main revenue sources which the school board is very familiar with. So what I want to do this evening is draw your attention to the variance column, which you will see the dollar amounts and the percents. Of course, whenever you prepare a budget, your revenues and your expenses must match. So if you look at your state funds for FY16, 127.3, this does represent 47.2% of our budget. If you look at the federal funds, 14.3, that does represent 5.3% of the budget. City county funds, 116.4, that represents 43.1, and then of the revenues, 11.8, that represents 4.4 of our budget. If you look at the variance column, you will see state funds did go up by about 1.2 million. Federal funds went up by 655,000. County funds went up by 17,408, or 0.01%, and other funds went up by 650,000. So overall, when you look at the budget, from 15 to 16, it did go up by 2.6 million. And almost half of that was from the state, and we had an increase of less than 1%. Here, we want to basically share with you the percent of the county budget that the schools did receive. You're basically looking at a trend data over the last 16 years, and when you look at it for 2000, you'll see the school division was receiving 60.7% of the county general fund. That is the yellow line or the orange line that you see. Based on what has occurred for the 16 budget, we're now down to 48.9. This is the lowest percent that we've ever received in the last 16 years that you do see here. So we did want to share that with you. The county's percent of the budget has grown from 39.3% up to 51.1. Here you'll basically see what the local transfer was, the 116, 415, 339. That did go up by 0.01%, 17,408. And I also wanted to take a moment to highlight that when we get to our revised gap, we are looking at getting back from the county $3.7 million in school CIP funds, and by us receiving those monies, we now have $328,000 that we can apply to our debt service. So we're using cash to fund 16 projects. Sure.
Ms. Gaines, just clarify this, the funds that we're talking about that we're getting back from the CIP, those are funds that could not have been used by the Board of Supervisors anyway and technically belonged to us to begin with, correct?
That is correct. Excellent point. Now here, I want to share with you what you're looking at, and I also, you can reference your handout. If you look at page 4 of your handout, this particular slide and page 4 of your handout, they go hand in hand. And what I wanted to share with you over the last 4 years, what you'll basically see is in 2013, the county did receive over $223 million. And of that amount, the school board did receive 481, and the county had 4.2. When you look at the purple line or the purple bar, you will see steady increases going from 223 million to 226 million to 232 million to 237 million. And when you look at the pink line, that is basically what the school board has received. So for FY16, Of the $5.4 million that the county did receive in new revenues, the school received $17,408, or 0.3%. So I wanted you to be able to see that visual.
Ms. Gaines, if I might, just for the board members, I know that most of you are familiar with some of the charts. These were part of our budget presentation to show different trends. I think that the relevance of them now is to some of the decisions that you're going to be weighing later on are, and why the trends are important, as we have to look at what decisions, as you deliberate going into the future, what can we reasonably expect in the future in terms of revenue. And so when you're determining which items to perhaps utilize or access one-time funding for, we need to realize that if those trends sustain themselves, then we can't count on additional revenue to close future gaps. So that's why we are sharing that, just so that you can be familiar with the trends as you deliberate over some of these decisions.
As we continue on, we want to give the board an update on the early retirement incentive program. When you really think about how and where we are today, looking at a budget that has increased by 1%, but yet we have presented to you a budget that basically has something in it for everyone. One of the reasons that we've been able to do that partially is due to the ERIP program. You will recall that the school board did approve the plan back in January based on results of various surveys coming from employees. And slide 9 just basically shows you what that criteria was. When you look at the status update, basically here, the final application due date was March 23, and based on that, as of that date, we had received 106 applications. Initially, when we started the plan, we had 434 individuals that were eligible, and that was really based on having 17 years of VRS experience. Then we had received some feedback from the community. We then had the school board consider that, and we not only said you can have 15 years of VRS, or you could have 15 years of educational services. And by making that particular adjustment, the number did go up by 111 eligible employees. However, knowing that we probably did not have a lot of people in that category that was interested, I did not revise my gap. I did not revise my assumptions. So I was still saying that of the 434, 40% were to take the plan. I was estimating a savings of $1.5 million. Now, you may ask the question, is it possible for us not to realize the 1.5? Yes, it's possible. However, I am confident that we will achieve the savings of 1.5 for a couple reasons. Number one, when you look at the 106, these individuals are retiring. When the HR department had their job fair, they interviewed over 460 individuals. Based on the trends that we are seeing, we have people coming in at step 0. Also, not only have the 106 plan to retire, since January, we have had an additional about 40 individuals to exit the school division. And from now until June, it's very probable that we'll even have more. So I am confident that we will realize the entire $1.5 million. Now, is there a possibility we could have more? That is possible. So what staff will be doing, HR and finance will be working very closely together, and we have an actual spreadsheet of all the 106 that have retired. We have a column that will show the replacement of that person as well as their salary, and once the hiring process is complete, we'll come back to you and give you the actual savings. So we're monitoring that very closely.
Ms. Gaines, can I ask you to clarify for the board, as you talked about a couple of reasons why 106 may still enable us to at least meet the projected 1.5 in savings. When you did your initial projections, you were basing that on a certain step of folks that were eligible in terms of the outgoing salaries and the differential between outgoing salaries and potential income salaries. I think maybe for the board to understand that perhaps it's the what we believe is of the 106 that I think you had shared, that the majority of those individuals are going out at a much higher step than step 15.
That is correct. We went back and we analyzed the numbers, And I want to say between step 23 and 36, that's where probably 70 to 80% of our people land. So with that, we're confident that the 1.5 will hold.
And I'd also like to share, if it's okay, I know that as we evaluate the impact of the ERIP program, both the positives and then the challenges as we lose certainly a variety of experience, things that have been of value in our organization for many years, and we don't want to minimize that. I think knowing the budget situation we find ourselves in tonight in terms of closing a gap, I think it certainly has been in the board's best interest and the division's best interest to continue to do all that we can internally, knowing that we cannot necessarily count on additional revenue sources to fund future priorities. But I did want to say that in terms of as we project these, it will remain, even if we, through the board's direction, entertain another opportunity like this in the future, we will never set a goal for having folks to leave our school division at a certain number. So I wanted to reiterate that the purpose is not to reach a goal. The purpose is to determine interest, to match that interest with the opportunity, and to see if we might realize a win-win in both savings for the school division, but also meeting the future desires of our very loyal and dedicated employees. So I wanted to make sure to reinforce that as we continue to move forward. Thank you.
So when you look at the breakout of the 106, we did want to share with you this evening, when you look at classroom teachers, they make up 64 of the 106, or 60%. When you look at support staff or school-based staff, you're looking at 37 of the 106, or 35%. And when you look at administrators, and we're basically looking here at 2 principals, 2 directors, and an IC, you're looking at 5 of the 106, or 5%. That's by employee category. If you want to look at the 106 by department, and this is also located on page 6 of your handout, you'll see that 83 of the 106 is primarily coming out of the instruction category, which makes sense because that is 70% of our budget. That's 78%. Maintenance, you're looking at 11 employees, or 10%. Attendance and health, this is primarily our nurses. You're looking at 6, or 6%. Transportation, 3 of the 106. And then for technology, food services, and fleet services, we have 1 from each one of those departments. So we wanted you to be familiar with that information. So going on to the 3-year budget forecast. This is very important this evening because as you begin to finalize your budget for FY16, it's very important that you understand whatever decisions you make for your 16 budget, they do have an impact on your out years. So let's look at the budget assumptions for the 3-year forecast, and I want to give kudos to Ms. Stombach and Mrs. Stevens for their work in preparing and helping us on today. The number 1 scenario that we have here, or assumption, is that every year, 17, 18, and 19, there will be a 3% COLA, or you can say at least $4 million will be allocated for a employee compensation pay increase. When you look at another very important assumption, assumption number 6, normally when you come to the first year of your biennium, you will primarily see an increase in your VRS, and that's mandated. Another key assumption is that when you look at debt service, now that we have issued, we had the bond referendum 2014, we are starting to see increases in debt service. So I do want to draw your attention to your handout, and if you can look at page 9 for me, because that will give you a very good illustration of what is projected to increase. Now keep in mind, these are assumptions. So assumptions can change, but I know that we are forward thinking, we are long-term planners, and we don't prepare a 1 budget cycle. You look at 3 years. So when you look at your handout, which is on page 9, I want to draw your attention when you go from FY16 to FY17. One of the largest increases that you will basically see will be in the area of your salaries, going up by 4.389. Another significant increase, the next largest one, will be your increases in employee benefits. And again, this is on page 9 of your handout. The next largest increase you'll see will be for your debt service, going from 23.2 to 25.7, which gives you a $2.6 million increase. Now, for our revenue assumptions, we are not projecting the change in composite index, because at this point in time, we're not sure what that will be. But right now, based on our assumptions, our projected student enrollment, we're projecting that state funds will go up by $2 million. However, Ms. Steinbach did share some very good news with me today. Based on some information that we see coming in, it looks like the state could have a higher amount of revenues collected for the following year by the tune of about $2.5 billion. So if that does realize, that is good news, because just a few months ago, we were in a situation where they were closing a shortfall. So that's good news. So we just want you to see what that 3-year gap looks like. So the bottom line is this, the takeaway for this slide, FY17, right now, based on what we're projecting, a gap of $8.2 million. For FY18, a gap of $7.3 million, and then for FY19, a gap of $3.6. And you may ask, well, why does the gap go down in 19? And that's primarily because debt service is projected to go down by $1.5 million, okay? So that brings us to the highlight of the meeting, which is our gap closing discussion. And I do want to basically frame this with a few comments. Number one, when we first started this journey, we were basically looking at a gap of $9.5 million. What made up this gap is the salary increase, the 3% across the board. What made up this gap was 58 positions, as well as pay increases in terms of hourly rates, stipends, as well as sub rates. So when you look at the gap of 9.5, we were able to bring that down. When the superintendent presented his budget, the gap was 2.7. So a lot of the heavy lifting was done up front. When the school board came back, they made some adjustments. We had gotten some good news from the state. They were willing to fund a pay raise of 1.5%. That was very good. We also saw another reduction in our VRS. We did some negotiations with our health insurance provider to project some savings there. And then also at that time, we did learn that the local transfer gap, we would be cut by $615,000. So that left us with a gap of $1.9 million. Then after that time, the school board did present to the supervisors their gap of 1.9. And based on that, they did restore $615,000 that was originally taken away. They also did return back to us our bond money of $3.7 million, which brought debt service down to about $300,000. And now today, we're looking at a gap of $910,000. And when you really think about that, that's really remarkable, because the budget is probably one of the best budgets we've had in many, many years. The pay raises, the 58 positions, trying to be more competitive when it comes to non-employee contract pay. So where are we today? If you look in your packet, which is your handout, we want to share with you something that we're calling the starter scenario, which is on page 11. Now, I want to highlight for you what are some of the benefits of the starter scenario. Number one, as we began to brainstorm, knowing that the gap would be $8.2 million in 17, and keep in mind that is the minimum gap. That does not take into account any new positions. It does not take into account any new programs. It does not take into account any additional increase in vigor at the state and federal level. So that's a bare minimum gap. So staff did not feel comfortable at that time bringing to you the idea of using our one-time money, which is other post-employment benefits. Right now, we do have $1 million out of FY14 carryover that's still sitting in our bank. Those funds have not been touched just yet because we wanted to first get through the budget cycle. Now, after seeing the $8 million gap, we're not recommending as a starter scenario that we use any of those funds, but if the school board chooses to do so, that is an option. But we want you to know that if you choose that option, what we're going to do is probably be in a situation where the budget gap will cause us to have to make some additional cuts. So with that being said, the scenario that you see today, number one, there were two main criteria that we looked at. We wanted to make sure that we focused on the classroom, those items to be maintained. We also wanted to make sure that we addressed any compliance issues as well as federal and state mandates. Also, we did not want to make any adjustments to any of the non-contracted pay because this year staff did receive a step and a 1%. Next year, they're slated to receive 3%. And if you don't provide the increases for the stipends, the hourly rates, and the subs, you will begin to have a larger gap between contracted pay and non-contracted. So those two main areas we did not make any adjustments to. The 58 positions, of those 58 positions, 30 of them are teaching positions, and many of them are focused on special ed, ESOL. They're focused on addressing class size needs as well as learning needs. And 30, that's not even enough for every school to have one. So we feel very confident that we need those positions. And all of the support positions in terms of the nurse, the communications, grant writer. We're looking at the transportation positions, the director for instructions. Those are things that we need to become more operational efficient. So when you look at the gap closing scenario, today what you see is primarily non-compensation. Our non-compensation budget did consist of $792,000 of non-comp. And so you may say, are these items that we need? Absolutely yes. Every item that was in that budget for FY16, they are true needs. But the question becomes, if you weigh the salary, the positions, while we need these, we do have a few items that are maybe working to our advantage. Number one, we know that potentially we could have more ERIP savings come in, but I won't know that until around September. When you look at where we are with the ADM, right now we're projecting 23,374. That number could come in, but I won't know that until December. In working with county staff, there may be another opportunity to refinance some debt. That's going to take a few months to take place. So right there, you have 3 additional revenue sources that could come in between now and potentially December or January. Some of these items here, we could defer until about that time frame, but these are things that we need for FY16. Also, because we are funded by category and by law, I am required to have monies left over. Can't have a deficit. If you do have a deficit, it's a class 3 misdemeanor. So I am going to have monies left over, and I'll know what that amount will be sometime around October. I will, but in all categories, you know. So with that being said, we have a potential 4 revenue sources that could potentially assist us with these items. 23,374, that's our average daily membership. K-12, yes, not pre-K, yeah, K-12.
I know that they're going to, staff, we're going to begin to get peppered, I think, with some questions and some feedback, and I think we're ready for that. But before we get too much into misdemeanors and those sorts of things.
Because it will be you and I.
I know, I know. So,
I'm not going down by myself.
Before we contemplate that future, I want to take this moment. One of the things that can get lost as we get to a place of closing a budget gap is we can forget the process that led us to this point. And I just want to make sure that as we begin to entertain different scenarios and feedback and questions, that to acknowledge the finance staff, my cabinet, all the budget advisory team, board input, everyone that worked as a team 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago, at the close of the, I think it was the FY14 budget, realizing that in order to fund pay increases, which were a big priority for the staff and the school board, that we needed to begin to determine how to build internal capacity to do that, that we could not continue to have our employees hoping for additional funding at the state, local, or federal level, but we had to begin to develop strategies. And that work has culminated really over the last 2 years, but it's been ongoing. And so I don't want, as we go to close this, to forget the work that has been done by staff to find ways for us to close those gaps internally. And I just want to thank them, and I really appreciate all of their work, because I think in many cases, if you tend to watch budgets play out in other places, normally you bring salaries in once you have taken care of all your other needs. We've put them in as assumptions. We've built them in as assumptions so that the board can begin to view over a period of years the amount that it costs to sustain that, not just to do it one time. And so our commitment to sustainability, I want to resonate throughout the conversations tonight, because that's really what we're talking about, is not continuing to be caught in a series of one-year budgets, which I had shared a couple years ago. I was fearing that we were still doing that, but that encourage our board to continue to take the long view as to how are we going to sustain and enhance our school division over a period of time, given the continued uncertainty and, in some cases, volatility of funding. So thank you to staff, and I just wanted to acknowledge that before we move forward. Thanks.
Ms. Blaylock.
A couple of comments and a couple of questions. When we were looking at the trends and where we were getting our funding, it's I don't know the proper word. It's ironic to me. I feel like we can sort of project what we're going to get from state or federal or other grants, but it's very difficult to project what we'll get from the local transfer sometimes. So I know that this has been one of the better budgets I've ever seen, ever. And it really is a shame that we were not funded adequately at the Board of Supervisors level. And I will absolutely proudly go on record saying that, as I'm voted to the school board, not the Board of Supervisors, and I advocate for public education, and public education needed them to step up and fund this decent budget. It is a needs-based budget, and I was extremely proud of it. And to see that $17,000 and a few odd cents was what we received was disappointing is an understatement, but that's the word I'll use. At the same time, as I said, I'm a school board member, so I'm not going to worry about it anymore. I got to work from today and what's in my plate. So when I look at your gap closing measures, every one of them we need. But it was very important we not mess with the compensation. It was very important that we stayed steadfast on what we had told our employees we would do for them. So with that behind us, that we weren't going to change their COLA, and it is a COLA. It is not a pay increase. Let's call it what it is. It's a COLA. It's not like the inflation didn't go up around them. So I'm very happy we're able to do that. But although we need everything, I trust that this board, that your staff and Dr. Baker and Ms. Gaines are making the right choices on how we close this gap. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to do it. I have a couple of questions, but I'm not going to tell you what you need to close, because you know better than I do. What I do know is we should have been fully funded. That should have happened, and it didn't. So let's start from tonight where we are. One thing that kind of jumped out is the buses. I remember a lot of need for special education buses. And Ms. Richardson's here. How will that affect us? I mean, not only are we mandated to have these buses, we should have them. So how is that going to look next year for our special education department and transportation if we use that as a gap closing measure?
I think Ms. Richardson and I will answer together,
Okay.
but it might be my voice. We are, as you know, in the CIP, we do have additional special needs buses. The bus that you
Yeah.
see in the potential cut here was one that would have been coming from the savings this year in operations in our fuel budget, which is rather unprecedented, and we hope to apply that towards an immediate one-time purchase of a bus, which we may not now be able to do.
Yeah.
But if you look at our CIP, I believe, and I think Mrs. Richardson would agree with me, that we have made that a priority, our special needs purchases, our additional purchases in that area.
So we feel confident the special education children will get what they need under this budget, even if we have to use that gap closing measure?
Correct.
Okay. And we talked about the grant writer, the floating nurse. The grant writers, I want that so bad because I believe it's self-sustaining actually after an amount of time. But it is something up front, so I understand that things like that might have to be delayed. The floating nurse, I want to clarify, it will not take a nurse out of a school. Not. Every school will have a registered nurse caring for the children. Okay. Okay, and that's all I have. As we move on, I may have a couple more small things, but that's it.
Ms. Grant.
After meeting with the Finance Committee on Thursday, and so to preface this, we had already gotten a list of non-comp items that we were going to discuss and recommended what we could live without and what we couldn't live without. I think this is honestly from being here 4 or 5 days ago with the full list of what we could cut and what we couldn't cut. This is really the most comprehensive job that we can do. And I want to point out that it truly isn't a cut, it's a deferment, because there is a possibility to prioritize these things and put them back in the budget as if we get more revenue in from the other sources. So we're not totally wiping them off the slate, which is very promising. It's just as of now, this is what we can defer until a later date.
Dr. Meyer.
I'm hoping I can interpret from what Ms. Graham said that one of those other revenue sources could be what we have left over for the end of this year, which we could then apply in December and whittle at the same list. Second point is that we had talked when we met with the supervisors about having a sustainable source of funding, and as the finance staff was trying to arrive at determining that so that we have a tool where we can use to plan better. I'm hoping that with the new county administrator, and if there are changes at the Board of Supervisors level, that we can still arrive at that so that we're not looking at a declining trend, but we're looking at what can we say this is what we should have and their commitment to what we can have for budgetary purposes and for funding. And I think that is still an absolute priority that we achieve that objective. My third point is that recognizing that the Finance Committee has already studied and is bringing to us, their best judgment, could we have some explanation as to what's entailed with assessment tool? With some things are clear, but some things aren't, or not intuitively, and that way we could get a better comfort level as to what we're saying yes to or what we're saying no to.
I think what we'll do, and this may just answer any other questions, I think it would probably be helpful for us to just go down this list. Some of these are, again, intended to be recurring costs because we're trying to build in solvency as far as being able to do these things on an annual basis. But so I don't want to diminish their importance. But I'll start with having Ms. Flanard, because various items are from either instruction or technology, and she can go through and just give a very general description of the purpose behind that item. And if you have follow-up questions after she's gone through the list, we can answer those. So we'll start, I guess, if you can just start at the top of that list, Ms. Flanard.
Good evening again. In looking at the curriculum item, the $10,000 there was in alignment with the strategic plan, and we were looking at really boosting our STEM curriculum materials. It was certainly something that we certainly hope to continue to enhance, and it is something that we will continue to see if we can look for that if December holds true. But that the curriculum piece right there is part of the STEM engineering kits itself. That's what that item is. The eLab online blended learning is an expansion of the program itself. It is twofold. One is to actually purchase the curriculum, and the other is also to provide the professional learning for our teachers as that program continues to expand and our need for online learning in a blended approach and not just the typical approach of a credit or unit recovery, but an actual blended instructional approach that many of you will remember from opportunities that you've had in the schools. I'm going to skip administration purchase services and continue down to the instruction purchase services. That is within the instruction purchase services at this office. That is not at the school level, and that it would be a little bit from all of our pots that we could total to be 87. So a little bit of my money in the regards to the instruction, Mr. Wolf's in secondary, elementary, those pieces that we could pull together to be 87,000. In the area of technology software support, this money actually, and we do have Mr. Zakari here if we have additional questions other than my overview. This is actually part of our technology software support is just what you think that is, and we are looking in regards to typically we have holdback money that we do get returned to us, and we would be looking at not having a holdback. So that would not be afforded to us in the Office of Instructional Technology. In the area of professional learning and leadership development training, professional learning has been severely underfunded for a number of years with the economy. It was one of the areas that got hit, and that area is really to support us branding Spotsylvania County Public Schools so that all of our teachers can really work towards a common understanding and a common approach for our students, regardless of what classroom. It was very evident in one of the findings from Advanced Ed, and so this was an effort to really target that specifically so that we could work towards that standardized approach for equality for all of our students. So that's an overview of that. And of course, the leadership development training goes hand in hand, because if we're getting the professional learning for our teachers, we certainly need to support the administrations and the principals and assistant principals, ICs learning, so that they can support one another. And then the final assessment tool. This is, you may recall that SOL tests were eliminated, certain tests were eliminated at certain grade levels, specifically in the 3rd, 5th, and middle school, and they have been reduced. However, what was not reduced was the mandate on tracking progress. So they do not take a SOL test. However, the county is required to track students' progress, and the assessment tool there was a measure for us to be able to do that systematically across the board. You may recall that it currently is Interactive Achievement is the tool that we use, and Interactive Achievement also allows us to have data on our students to target instruction specifically on their needs, as well as to start to develop some trend data just like the SOL tests have given us previously.
And I was going to have Ms.
Sure.
Gaines, if you would go with the administrative
Okay.
service.
When you look at administration purchase services, kind of similar to what Ms. Flanar has done in instruction, based on where we are, we would take monies from all different lines within administration with purchase services. So everyone, basically across the board cuts. That's what you're looking at. Also, if you look at the one with maintenance repairs, basically here we were trying to take savings from gasoline, put it into the maintenance department, because with our aging buildings, we are required to repair those buildings, and unfortunately, you can't use CIP funds. And over the last several years, that area has been cut consistently. So that's something we were trying to restore, but based on some additional sources that may come in, we're hopeful that maybe half of that could go back at some point.
Thank you for staff for that. Any other questions? Ms. Blaylock.
I just want to point out, I agree, a lot of these things are deferment. Somebody's got their mic on, needs to turn it off. Thank you. But at the same time, I've been on this board a long time. These things have been deferred for how many years, Ms. Gaines? We can't keep deferring. A list of that has been deferred and deferred and deferred. I have watched it every year. It's time we start funding some of these things.
Mr. Braswell.
I just have a couple, I have a question and I have a comment to make, so I'll ask the question first. Ms. Gaines, on the fuel costs, what factor did you use to determine or project our fuel costs, not only for this year, but in future years?
Now, I know Kermit Schaefer is here, and I don't want to steal his thunder. And because he is retiring, we're going to call him up to the table. Come on up here, Kermit. I do have the answer, but I do want to, out of due respect, would like him to respond.
Absolutely.
We follow the, okay. We follow the fuel prices constantly. We're always looking at crude oil prices as well as pump prices, wholesale prices, futures, and we try to stay on top of it. The current fuel prices are down considerably. The average price per gallon for diesel from 2014 was $3.15. This year so far, it's $2.66. At the year-to-date average price, fuel will cost about $1.66 million for this year, and we had over $2 million in the budget for it.
So that's about what, you said about $500,000 of savings?
Yes, close to it.
And thank you for that. And the other question I wanted to ask was the health care costs. In out years, you project a 5% increase. What was the trigger for a 5% increase?
What we basically seen the last 2 or 3 years, our trend is going down. And when we look at working with our third-party vendor, at a minimum, they use an inflation rate of about 10%. And that's the standard nationally. So in looking at the fact that we do have a reserve, I looked at 5% instead of the normal 10%.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I wanted to, I think it's a really good question too, because as we're looking at sustainability of not only things that we might reduce, things that we might be able to pick up later through additional funding, the things that we were funding this year, we did a reallocation based on healthcare savings. And we've had a fairly remarkable 2 years in a row compared to what was a fairly remarkable 2 years before that of increases. So we've been kind of rich man, poor man in that scenario. We've gone from having much more severe deficits as a result to claims going sky high to the last 2 years where we have really benefited in the budget process. But we can't count on every year being able to assume that level of savings. If anything, we have to anticipate some slight increases. So 5% is on the conservative side, really. But I do think that's something to note as we're looking at out years, because that could be an additional part of our gap. We hope we stay where we are now, but that's probably not something we can count on.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. And I also want to just make a comment. I, first of all, want to commend Dr. Baker and his staff in its entirety for the very hard work that you've obviously demonstrated in the preparation of this budget and everything that was done prior to this point. It was not only done very professionally, but it was done with simplicity. And because it was done with simplicity, there's apparent transparency in the process. But I also want to take an opportunity to commend all of the board members as well. I was a bit disenchanted as a result of the decision that was made by the County Board of Supervisors to only fund us to $17,000 as well. I had an opportunity to speak to some of them, 3 of them actually, we had a chance to talk eyeball to eyeball about it. And I shared with them that, that this board was not going to allow that decision to make them cynical about the process, that we were going to work together to get the job done for 23,000 students, and that we weren't going to allow any personal differences of opinion to get us turned away from the main effort, which were the children of Spotsylvania County. I was very emphatic when I had an opportunity to speak with them about it, and I told them that I was very proud of this particular board, that we had the capacity to put aside any personal differences to deal with the main effort of looking out after the children of Spotsylvania County. So to Dr. Baker and your staff, I appreciate everything that you've done to this point and you will continue to do. And to my peers, I commend you for your professionalism and your ability to put the main effort, what we were elected to do, look out for the children of Spotsylvania County. Thank you.
Dr. Meyer?
Just a kind of a, don't know how to broach this one. My comments are going to be because I'm trying to find a future long-term kind of a solution that can provide us some savings down the road. So I want to ask the question in terms of whether there is future in expanding contracted custodial services even at the elementary level. Not knowing, seeing that there were 11 at the maintenance, but I don't know if those were all custodians. Was that looked at by staff as a first question? Is that an item that was examined, or does it have fruition, or does it have? I'm only asking. I understand the sensitivity of the question. I truly do, and understand where there may be objection to it. But I think, as a board, we do need to take a look at some fiscal options, long term, that can be handled through attrition, and that there may be a potential for some savings. So I'm asking in that light because we're at the point of, whether that's an option versus something else that we're doing. And I don't know if the numbers yielded anything to begin with.
The initial answer to that was, had staff looked at it prior to the final day of the early retirement program, we had not looked at that. We had discussed that many of our, both in the cafeteria area as well as custodial services, that there had been an outsourcing effort, and that there was one area, elementary, that had not yet happened. And I always believe when enough time has passed, there's a reason that something hasn't happened. And so before we go head first into something where our good people are concerned, we felt like it was important to first look, is there ever a good timing to begin to investigate that and to have proactive, sensitive conversations with building principals, with maintenance, with eventually our custodians themselves. But because our early retirement program seems to be yielding a number of retirements at that particular level, we believe that we're compelled to at least look at what that potential could be. But the way that we will be doing that is to be having those conversations. As I said, it will not be something that I would imagine will come to the board prior to May the 11th as a budget impact for FY16. However, as we begin to secure replacements for outgoing staff, we will be trying to determine through those conversations whether this is there's some viability in doing that. But as I said, it is not something that is imminent, but it is something now that we have begun to investigate as late as the past week. So,
and I bring that up because it's the opportunity that's there that we don't have normally. Because normally when there is a vacancy, we're looking for the replacement. And, it's something that does need, I think, needs to be looked at. I understand, having been in Mr. Uppercoat's shoes, I fully understand the sensitivity that's there. But at the same time, as a board member, it's my obligation also to be cognizant of what are the fiscal repercussions and the timing of this You don't have an opportunity like this occur every year. This occurs once every 5 years. So if we pass up this opportunity, then it's going to be quite a while before this kind of opportunity becomes available. So I think, yes, that staff looks at this. I think we owe it to look at it so that we're making the right decision.
And I think it's important, again, that we are investigating that and having those conversations.
Good.
What can quickly happen when we acknowledge that we're investigating something is, unfortunately, the rumor control of something is imminent, something has already been predetermined. But we will be gaining a variety of perspectives on that, not the least of which that I would imagine that even in a possible scenario of that outsourcing, that the preservation of our current employees would be certainly a parameter in terms of how to go about it, that it would not be something that would be, I know from the outset, that we would be looking to do across the board, but it would be investigating the feasibility of gradual, as people leave due to attrition, retirement, other job opportunities, is there a win-win in that for the school division? So.
Thank you, Dr. Baker.
Mr. Blaine?
Just an aside for the last conversation there is that that's a very steep hill to climb from my standpoint, a really tough one. So, but it should be looked at, I agree. Mr. Upperco, the transportation buses that you're at this point not going to replace, are they in service now, I'm assuming? I mean, they're operational buses that need to be replaced, but they're working.
Are you referring to the one that we're proposing as a possible cut?
Yeah,
That
right,
has
the
not
90
yet, that's not in operation yet. That has not been purchased at this time.
No, I know that, but you're going to replace some buses.
Correct.
The buses that are to be replaced are currently in use.
They are in use now, and they will be, the new buses will be funded through the CIP and not through the operating budget.
Okay.
So we're trying to stick to our replacement schedule of 15 years. So those buses that will be replaced are on the road now, and they will be replaced with buses that are going to be funded by the CIP.
Yeah.
Does that answer your
And
question?
if you were to replace them tomorrow, would your cost of maintenance decrease?
My cost of maintaining the buses?
The buses that are now in service are going to be replaced with
Correct.
new buses. When you have new buses, will your cost of maintenance of those buses have decreased?
Yes.
Significantly, would you say, for a few years?
I would think they would, I don't know significantly, but they should decrease, yes.
Okay, and that I assume would affect the $200,000 maintenance, repair parts and supplies and drive that down some corresponding number probably.
Possibly. That is primarily in the area of maintenance for a variety of supply and repair lines. The connection with transportation there is the fact that any savings in transportation we could have used cross-categorically to pay for trying to reestablish what we had been underfunding for the last several years. In the past, we usually had some reserves in the area of electricity that we would be able to tap, if you will, when our supply and repair lines became rather close to zero. But now that the electricity rates are scheduled to go up about 8%, we can't count on being able to do that. So consequently, what we were hoping to do initially was to, again, because of the savings in fuel from transportation, use those funds to offset and to build a somewhat of a reserve in the areas that have been previously underfunded. And that would be in the area of repair and replacement line for spare parts. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. I'm going to suggest that we discuss and maybe debate with our county board if they can free up some additional of the CIT money that was set aside for their Cedar Forest Road up there. I think we gave them $6 million, and they've spent a couple hundred, about $2 million of that, I understand. But there's some money there that is still unused.
I'm not sure how much money there is that's unused, because some of that money went to replace the intersection where they now have a light down at Mills and Massaponax Church Road.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if there's much more than the 3.7 that remains that could be
You think so?
given to us.
Okay,
I'm
well
just
then,
not sure.
if that is accurate, then I'm operating erroneously. My suggestion would have been to get some additional of those funds back. We've got them already, is what you're saying. The other area that I think maybe we can save some money, and we've talked about categorical funding a number of times. And I just wonder, could you give us a sense, Mrs. Gaines, about what it is costing us right now because of categorical funding, and you have some general idea?
In looking at categorical funding, two things. Number one, it's something that when we do have to do it, it does require school board approval. And when we bring it to the school board, basically there are 4 steps involved. When we have to take it to the Board of Supervisors, that basically does double the amount of steps involved. It does go from 4 steps to 8 steps. And those 8 steps basically are, I am required to give the documentation to the county finance director and budget director. I'm required to go to the county admin's wrap-up session. I'm also required to go to the county's finance committee to present, and then go to the Board of Supervisors to present. Also, when you look at where we are in FY, I want to say it was 13, we did have in total almost 13 to 16 budget amendments. And on average, it did cost us about $1,000 from beginning to end. So it does have a price tag associated with it.
There's some undocumented costs too, I understand, just the time that it's the lack of flexibility, for example. And I understand that when we have categorical funding, we're obligated to have carryover funds in each one of the separate categories, which would be significantly reduced if we did not have categorical funding.
That is true. I can say certainly as a CFO and also in working with school bookkeepers, being funded by category, it does make us ultra, we're already conservative, but it makes us ultra conservative because you're just not sure if you're going to have that unforeseen situation at the end of the year. So you're holding on to funds that you know you need, but you can't spend them because we don't have a reserve. We don't have a contingency.
Mm-hmm.
So that is correct, Mr. Blaine.
So our flexibility is reduced, and we've got unused funds that we could move much earlier.
Absolutely.
And what's the bottom line advantage to us for categorical funding, if there is one?
Let me go ahead and
Thank you, sir.
comment.
Okay. No, that's an important question, I'm sorry. Is there any advantage to the county board for categorical funding, do you think?
I'm going to defer to Dr. Baker.
Okay, on that.
We've had these conversations. I think if I were to just break it down, this is something that we currently don't have a choice. We currently have been required. I'm gonna get to that too. Yeah. We're required to do this. Certainly, from an efficiency standpoint, we might argue that we could be better if we didn't. I don't think that anyone would disagree that we could move more quickly, we could make decisions a little bit faster, and there would be less steps. To try to quantify that into a dollar amount, I think, becomes very challenging for staff, and in trying to quantify it, that takes the very time that we're talking about saving. Frankly, it's just one of those things that we have to do, and we're doing it. I think the latter part of what you were asking is, are there any advantages? We would not be able to answer that question other than I think that if through the last few years have we been able to develop better understandings of how we target and utilize funds across the categories, both with county officials as well as elected officials, they would have to answer that. I'm hoping that there's a better understanding of how we build our budget, what the considerations are, that there's an educational component to that. I recall a few years ago that being part of the rationale is to, as local funding is provided, that there's a better understanding of how that funding contributes to meeting the needs of the school division, because they have to make certain decisions on the categorical transfers. But for us, that is speculation. We can't answer that. That would have to come from the folks at the county level to say how it has benefited them. So we have to be cautious in assuming one way or the other how that's benefited.
I think that's a good answer. That's what I would have expected from Mrs. Gaines, so you're in the same ball team. But I would like to suggest that we at least explore with the board, unless they, in review themselves, say, look, this is such a big advantage to us, they should keep it. But if they cannot do that, we can save money. They gave us $17,000. This will save us half of that to add into that, so we can save some money there, a little bit maybe only. But it's also the frustration and the time that we're spending that you can't put time on, and I recognize that. But I think it's worth, as Baron was saying, Mr. Braswell, to collegially, we'll get it, have a conversation with them. And I think, frankly, that they very well may be open to that. I think that's the one thing that I have at this point I'd like to contribute. Thank you.
Mr. Laura?
I've been sitting here listening to polite conversation the whole evening. And in fact, the last couple of weeks, not all the time, but from time to time, I would think about how do we get to where we are today? And please give me a minute, and then I'll be happy to leave. But there was a time that in Virginia, school boards were appointed by the Board of Supervisors. And the problem that some of us had with that scenario was that a supervisor would nominate someone, but that person had to be approved by the entire board. And if that person didn't go along with the process, it was not uncommon for that person not to be reappointed to the school board or sometimes asked to leave. So I was one of those people years ago that signed a petition to get the school board elected. There were thousands of people throughout the Commonwealth who engaged in that endeavor. Initially, we wanted the board, like they do in other states, to have taxing authority, but we realized early in the game that was not going to happen, not in Virginia. So we were happy to get not quite half a loaf, but less than that. At least we will be elected. And I have served in school boards where school board members were quite feisty in their defense of children. This board, and I love all of you dearly, but we're very polite, we're very friendly. And one word that keeps coming to my mind is disappointment. And I kept thinking about my little son when he was 7 years old, whose gerbil died, and we were all disappointed. And I remember taking him for a ride and bought him ice cream and then bought him another gerbil, case closed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a gerbil dying. This is a lot bigger than that. But I haven't noticed in the community in general a outcry of what's happening to our schools. But the worst part of the whole thing is this page 11 in this document. And here's why I say that this is the worst of everything, because anyone that looks at this say, well, there's nothing really here that is critical. The schools will continue to go on. The children will have buses to transport them. Teachers will be there, working a little harder, but teachers are givers by nature. Mr. Wolf will come to work, and continue doing the job of 3 people and not complain about it, because that's his nature. Mrs. Frenard, she'll continue doing her job, and the same with Dr. Baker, and I can name every one of the 1,000 employees in our school division. Life goes on. And in fact, I have sat here for a number of years when our revenues were going down, and yet our academic achievement were going up. So where's the correlation? Is there any correlation between funds allocated and academic achievement? Someone will argue, no. Spotsylvania is a good model to show that there is no correlation. So this is where we are today. I haven't heard any anger, emotion, or anything. Everybody said, well, it is what it is. This is not different than when we were appointed to the school board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laura. Dr. Meyer.
Mr. Law, I agree with everything you said, except what the staff has done is what they do every year. They get a lemon, and they make lemonade. They make it work. They make it work with the least detriment to the program, safeguarding what are our primary objectives. If we had received the funding that we had requested, then we would be able to do every one of these things, and none of which you could say are not necessary. I think Ms. Grant pointed out earlier in the very beginning, these are deferments, so that our objective is that we will still do each of these, we just can't do them now. We'd like to do them as of July 1st. We may have to wait till October 1st, November 1st, or January 1st, but our intent is still to do these, so that it's our way with the least impact on the students and staff to be able to swallow the shortage of the funds, but it will have an impact because the majority of these are on instruction. And as Mrs. Fleur pointed out, both on the assessment tool, on the professional learning, the technology, instructional purchase services, they're doing it from within their own accounts, the eLab online and curriculum. The majority of these are instructional items. So instruction is one that's being impacted. And they're just making it work with the least detriment possible, so that we still have the objective that we wanted to accomplish. We just can't do it in the time frame and timeline that we really wanted to do it. So there is an impact. And, I agree I'm going to support 100% what's been submitted, because I think that's the most reasonable approach that staff could have presented, with the objectives that we outlined from the very beginning of what we wanted to accomplish with the budget, with protecting our staffing, protecting our salary increase, and taking advantage of the health insurance and the VRS, all those availabilities that we had with the least detriment possible. But yet we still want to accomplish these. We're not going to give up on them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Graham.
Everyone knows I really like to stay on point, and I don't talk very much, but I have a little teeny tiny story that Ray made me think of. I lose money every year in my business. It's not amazing that horses cost a lot of money. Every year I go to my accountant hoping that I just might get something back from the IRS. I don't. Am I upset about it, Ray? I'm very upset about it, but there's nothing I can do to change it. So I think that's the same thing as we all came together tonight. We were upset about the Board of Supervisors' decision, but instead of dwelling on that, we have to make a very good economic decision and actually agree on something. And it sounds like from this work session, which is the point of the work session, is how we're going to close the gap. I think we all pretty much agree that these are pretty good measures to close this gap, which I think was the whole point of tonight. So thank you very much for putting this scenario in front of us. And I think it sounds like you have all of our support. I know that Ray has a couple ideas maybe for the future that we can incorporate. Dr. Meyer has some ideas. I'm sure Amanda has some ideas. So in the future, we could even look to saving some money ahead of time instead of having to wait till the end to do it. As far as the categorical funding, I think you might make an argument that it's a little more transparent. Just want to be devil's advocate there. But no one wants to agree with me on that one. And I would like to assure my board that as part of the Finance Committee, we have already been working, and staff is working on some wording for a proposal for a revenue sharing agreement with the county. And that is our goal, primary goal for the Finance Committee to get done this year, is at least get some primary wording together. So next year we might have, or in future years, maybe not next year, we might have a better idea of what percentage of the revenue we can get, and we don't have to play a guessing game, because this guessing game costs more hours of staff work. If we know ahead of time, it would be a lot easier.
Okay, thank you. As we've said, we are looking, I think I've heard the word sustainable. I've heard the word sustainable probably 6 or 7 times, if not more, tonight. It's what we're looking at, and although we're going to have to cut some of the items, we're hoping that they come back, so they will be sustainable. And I'm happy to hear that we're all pretty much on the same page at this. And I will finish my comments in a minute. Ms. Blaylock, you had something else to say. Yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I wanted to point out something before we close tonight, and you have my consensus. Ms. Gramp's right, you came for that, you have mine as well, and I know Dr. Meyer and Ms. Gramp have already agreed to theirs as well. But I want to point out something that I want to say so the public realizes, something about administration here that I'm extremely proud of, is that we've never looked at 1 year. And if you really want to worry, think about where we would be had we not restructured central office a few years ago, went self-funded, the ERIP program, the outsourcing. So that needs to be noted. This is not a 1-year thing where we're going, oh, let's go fix. We'll do this. It's our job. And our teachers and staff in classrooms are going to step up, and those kids are not going to lack any services. I don't never once worry about that. We just have amazing staff in the schools. But that cannot be understated. That has saved us from pink slips. That has saved us from kids suffering in a classroom because the staff just was not available. That is huge. So the way we have looked forward for years is not to be unnoticed. So I appreciate that. And I know I don't even have to ask if we're going to continue to do that. That's how we work. That's just how we roll. That's how we roll. So I want to just point that out before we close tonight, but you do have my consensus.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'm just going to kind of go through the table, see if anyone has any other comments, and see if everyone is agreeable to what staff has brought us so that they can move on. And then we do still have one more item where we need to make a decision on if the May 4th meeting is necessary, but my guess is if we're at a consensus now, that meeting would not be necessary, but we still have to take a vote on that. So starting with Ms. Blaylock, you've said.
I'm fine with removing the May 4th meeting.
Mr. Blaine, okay?
I hope that the staff didn't take offense to anything that I said. I think, every one of you have always and will always be my heroes. I know that, and I don't expect you, professionals, to go in public and, no, that's not your role. And you're doing a great job. That page 11 took a lot of work. I know that. I wasn't talking about the staff, and I hope you didn't take it that way, except for Mr. Wolf. But the community in general, yeah, am I concerned about the funding for public schools in America? Yes. Am I concerned about public funding in Spotsylvania? Yes, I am, because things don't go bad overnight. Things go bad through time. But we haven't shown, I'm repeating myself, we haven't shown that in fact, our schools are going up while the fundings are going down.
Are you
Thank
okay
you.
with?
Yeah, about skipping the one-day meeting? Yeah, that's fine, yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Stay on
Yeah.
Next.
Yes, let's do that. I'm all in favor of skipping the one-day meeting, yeah, on May 4th.
Just making
Yeah.
sure.
I'm in agreement on skipping the meeting, but I do want to say that probably I needed to open as Mrs. Blaylock did, to say how disappointed I am with the lack of full funding as requested, which was a minimum budget to begin with. And I think that we have to look at our values and begin, because I have had so many people come to me and say, Mr. Blaine, I'd be willing tomorrow to put another $100 into this education and through taxes anytime. And I've had so many people say that, and I think that we need, as we go ahead into this next year, and maybe Ray and I agree here, I'm not sure, that we need to begin to increase our funding to do the things that we need to do for our children. Because when we don't do it, if we're not paying for it, the kids are paying for it. And some of the children that miss getting taught something at first or second or third grade, they have a terrible time catching up, some of them. And they may pay for the next 50 or 60 years that we could have helped had we done the right job. Thank you.
First of all, I have no objection to the canceling the May 4th meeting. And I'd just like to also state that there is a quiet majority of citizens in the county that are discouraged about the results of the decision that was made. Just because they're not screaming and yelling doesn't mean that they're not disappointed. And I hear, as well as many others, their voices, and I continue to try to do my very best to help in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. We have, with what we have to cut, we're in the job of instruction. That's our job here. We're a school, but most of the items that we have to cut are coming from instruction. But as we're saying, as we're hopeful, that this will be a deferment versus a complete cut, but that, like I said, that's our hope that that will happen. But it looks like you have a consensus from the board that we will, that we agree with your reductions here. And I'm going to go ahead and ask, just to make it formal, and ask for a motion and a vote, since it is an item on our agenda as an action item. So I'm going to ask for a motion and a second, and then a vote for us to not have the work session on the 4th, because it was on our original calendar.
I move to not have the work session on Monday, the 4th.
I'm going to say that's your motion. So a motion to not have the meeting on the 4th.
And second.
A second by Dr. Meyer. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. And is there anything else, Mrs. Gaines?
Just one quick comment. I would be remiss if I did not thank my amazing staff. I tell them all the time I'm only great because they are great. So Marcia Stevens, Barb Stombach, Bridget, Doreen, Leah, just amazing. And also I want to thank Cabinet, because we come together every morning on Monday mornings brainstorming on how we can bring the best presentation to the school board. And I want to thank each one of you individually and collectively. You are the best school board members anyone could ever want to work for. So I want to say thank you. I really do appreciate you, and have a good night.
Wait, I think we have a couple more comments. Dr. Baker, I'm sorry. Dr. Baker.
No, I mean, well, I think LaShawn said it. You're the best around. Isn't that like a song from the 80s? No, I did want to let the board know as we're bringing a close to this budget that preparations for next year's budget are already underway. And I appreciate the reinforcement of long-term strategies and targeted initiatives. And as we continue to further develop and study what we need to do for the future, I think you can anticipate that we will continue to bring the needs forth in future budgets, and perhaps in greater numbers. Thank you.
And with that, once again, thank you very much to all of staff, Dr. Baker, your staff, Ms. Gaines, everyone. Thank you very much. And motion to adjourn. Motion by Dr. Meyer, second by Ms. Gramp, and all those in favor? Aye. 7-0. Thank you.